Your Partner in Success Radio is a free business podcast with host Denise Griffitts. It's all about great stories, conversation, and context to help you move your business and life forward with actionable tips and advice from her guest experts. To listen and subscribe, just find us on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you consume your podcasts.
Good morning and welcome back to Your Partner in Success Radio. I am your host, Denise Griffitts, and I'm so glad you're here. Now, this podcast today is sponsored by Ben Gay III. Now, Ben is a legendary sales trainer. He is an author and the creator of the Closer series, which are largely known globally as the Sales Bibles. He is a must-have resource for anyone serious about mastering the art of selling, and I'm grateful for his support and for the powerful principles he continues to share with entrepreneurs and sales professionals, around the world. So be sure to check out his books and training at BFG3 theclosers.com. And you can also find these books with free shipping on eBay at Ronzoni Books. So today our topic is, I love this topic, from bootstrapped to bought, smarter lead generation and sales strategies for founders with my guest, Bill Rice. Now, Bill Rice is a seasoned entrepreneur, a marketing expert, and founder of Kaleidico and the Bill Rice Strategy Group. With more than 20 years in digital marketing from the pre-Google days, today's AI tools, he has helped countless businesses grow smarter and scale. And he has built and sold multiple companies, including a seven-figure agency, and now focuses on helping fintech and other businesses master lead gen, sales systems, and position themselves for sales exits. And I'm going to apologize. My voice is just shot this morning. I think it was me yelling at the neighbors to stop popping fireworks all weekend long. So, Bill, welcome to Your Partner in Success Radio. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And before we get started, can you share a bit about you and how you should, how do you like to show up in the world? You're going to be doing all the talking today. I think I warned you about that.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's a super opportunity here just to kind of talk to your audience. I think we share a lot of the same type of passions for the folks that are in this audience of just trying to help them make success out of all the gifts that they're given. As far as kind of my background and journey, it's a meandering and I always say more interesting probably on the outside than it was on the inside. But I started my career early in the Air Force, actually began in pilot training and ultimately didn't get a weapons system out of that. We were kind of in a drawdown phase, and I went into what they called the bank at the time, and then ultimately had to do my first pivot in life. I had never thought of doing anything but being a pilot. But in that transition, I had to kind of in the Air Force you're in, and then if for whatever reason your career field doesn't work out, you got to kind of look around and find another job because they sort of have a hold of you for a few more years. So looked around, I found a small organization called Air Force OSI, Office of Special Investigations, and they generally are known for kind of their criminal investigative side, which I did for a period, but then they have a kind of a smaller area, which is counterespionage and counterintelligence operations. And that's where I spent most of my career in the Air Force. Super interesting time, whereby we were kind of in the early phases of the internet. This was in kind of the mid 90s, where the internet is starting to be a thing. And as I was doing counterintelligence operations and sort of all the traditional stuff, that's kind of the classic older spy novels might have introduced you to, we were seeing a lot of that sort of tradecraft and the approaches to intelligence moving online. And I thought that was fascinating. And so that's where I started to kind of take my group is bringing that online. Then ultimately got out, went to the civilian world where I went through the revolving door, as we called it, and essentially went into intel for the three-letter agency, CIA, NSA, transitioning some of that stuff that I was working on kind of into those areas. the interesting thread here as we get to marketing is that in that sort of time period, I was being introduced to the internet. I was having to build systems and create sort of behavior inducing or behavior observing sort of campaigns, if you will. And all of that to me, as I kind of then transitioned into the commercial world and worked this is again my introduction to being an entrepreneur, transitioned into being one of actually the first seven or so working on the first internet only bank. And that transition over to there ended up sort of landing me for a short time with internet security, but then ultimately into marketing and sales and those sorts of things. I saw a lot of similarities there in the early internet. And again, as Denise said, this was pre-Google, pre-Facebook. And so we just had kind of raw traffic that we were dealing with on the internet. And we were looking at what at that time were really, really new and quite fascinating and sort of unexplainable. And I'd seen this on the Intel side too, unexplainable sort of user behavior. And as all of us in marketing know now, consumers and people behave very differently on the internet, somewhat erratic. They get confused, they move back and forth. They will visit your site and then leave the site and then do some other research and come back. And when you're looking at all of this in data, it can be a little bit confusing. So what I had become good at was kind of looking for those patterns and looking for ways to help sort of guide those individuals into doing sort of more productive things, in our common vernacular now, conversion rate optimization. And so that's kind of what led me into and stuck me in marketing for kind of the long haul, and done a variety of things there, mostly in the area of financial services, both B2C and B2B. And again, I love that area. It feels a little bit comfortable and familiar coming out of the government. I'm really comfortable with highly regulated industries like financial services, so that gives me a little bit of a leg up. And then, like I said, sort of that thread of doing marketing and kind of looking at the data and the patterns and trying to determine kind of what's going on and how to sort of create more effective strategies to kind of give us the outcomes that we want. And so that's what led me to creating now a couple different agencies. And that's, as Denise mentioned, one of those exited the bank that I was sort of did my transition with, helped lead the sale of that to private equity. So I've seen a couple of sort of bootstrap, also venture funded, opportunities, and then, sort of how to grow them with sales and marketing to move them into that exit phase. So that's kind of a long, and I think it's always interesting to talk through that, because I think my particular journey hasn't been quite as straight a path as most in the sales and marketing genre. So anyway, it's a fun story to tell.
And I had all kinds of questions to ask you, and you just killed all of them. You just went straight through it and told me everything I wanted to ask you. But another thing I want to ask you, and this is just off the top of my head, if we bumped into each other at a coffee shop, what business problem would you probably be thinking about on your laptop? What would you be doing?
Yeah, where I really like to live and focus and do things is really at that moment of transition, or kind of, as Peter Thiel said, 0 to 1. So one or the other. Either a business is moving through and transitioning phases, maybe moving from bootstrap to traction to scaling, or something that's in a very early phase. I love working with founders. I love working with early venture funds where they're just trying to zero in and calibrate into their market fit and that go to market strategy. So I really like those points where we're trying to figure out something that's a little bit new That goes all the way back to the beginning. But I would most likely be working either on a go-to-market strategy for a brand new, early stage venture, or helping a business that's maybe been operating for a handful of years, and is at a point where they need to make a pretty significant transition to the next level. That's my favorite spot.
I bet. And you mentioned, and I've had other guests who have mentioned patterns. Patterns aren't something that most of us, me, I don't know patterns. I don't recognize them. But when I talk with people like you, I'm like, okay, how do I learn more? How do I start observing and looking for patterns?
Yeah. So one of again, I like to kind of reflect on where I feel like I've had advantages as I've moved through the journey. And one of the advantages I think that illustrates this in building agencies is most agency owners, all of us, first and foremost, all seem to be accidental agency owners, which I think is always interesting. But most are creatives. And so they're creatives that have done some freelancing or have a particular specialty and skill, again, in that creative zone. And they sort of get to the point where they want a little bit more out of things, or they want people to help them, or they like to build a team. And so they, in their creative way, try to kind of figure out how to make that a little bit bigger. I am not a creative. I come probably most clearly from a standpoint of kind of sales and marketing. So even from the beginning, in my Intel days, I was often trying to convince, higher headquarters, if you will, to take on my crazy operational strategy or something. So I was always sort of pitching and marketing ideas, and so and that, in order to do that, one of the things that I think makes that successful is, instead of like a creative would do, always starting with a blank sheet of paper, over time, I've essentially started to sort of, I think, mentally categorize things, and look at the world through a couple of standard lenses. Like I think that most things and most problems that I encounter, one way or another, fit a pattern that I've seen before. Sometimes we talk about mental models. I think that's another good sort of framework to look at these things. But I have a few patterns or mental models that a lot of times I will take new challenges and sort of figure out what they most closely fit with, because then I can put them in a box, and then I have, at least in my mind, a high probability of success because I've seen that pattern. I've been in that box before, and I've done these things, and it generally gets me some success. And so when I talk about patterns, that's a lot of what I'm talking about. Same thing with data. When I pull data in, oftentimes I can kind of quickly look at that data and see at least an analogy to something that I've seen before, and that gives me, a little bit better insight, I think, into what I'm looking at, and then perhaps what we're going to do next.
I have to tell you, Bill, I have to self-correct here because I was telling you that I don't really recognize patterns. And while you were talking, especially at the first part of when you started, I was scribbling things down. I'm wrong. I do recognize patterns, particularly in the podcast world,
Mm.
very much so in the podcast world. But like you, I'm just so used to doing what I do. And, you know, it just doesn't even occur to me to maybe question why I do what I do. But I'm recognizing and have always recognized patterns in podcasting. But I
Yeah.
didn't recognize it until you just told me why I should. So I'm going to be spending some time with my blank pieces of paper because that's how I operate and see what I come up with. And thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always nice to put a little, even with the blank sheet of paper, just to put a little bit of a frame down to kind of get you started, or even a way that you start to analyze problems. So again, frameworks, patterns, systems, there's a lot of different sort of, I think, analogous words for it, but giving yourself a little bit of scaffolding so that you can start to build from.
Exactly. Now I'm all excited, and I've got plenty to do today and tomorrow and the next day. But I am putting together in my head some time, it might be midnight tonight, to really sit down with what you just shared with me and taught me.
Excellent. Excellent.
Well, you've been in digital marketing since the pre-Google days, and honestly, so have I. I started my web development company 20 years ago, and this podcast 17 and a half years ago. She's old enough to drive. Um, and I remember when all we had was it MySpace? And even
Mm,
that was, and then all of a sudden here comes WordPress, and I thought, oh my God, there is a God, which I always knew that, but
yeah.
it's grown a lot. And sometimes, and I watch people online just get terrified, particularly of AI and, the big shifts that are happening now. And as far as I can tell, they're bouncing like, oh gosh, I have to do this. I have to go do that. And they're in panic mode. What do you tell people like that? Just calm down. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think again, I took a lot of, I really enjoyed my the time in the military. I think it taught me a lot that I use over and over again. But I think it is in those moments where things are kind of, not going as planned and everything that you do sort of calm down and try to get a sense of sort of centering, slow, everything down. But to your point of that transition time, and again, I said I love this. I'll tell you a quick little story. When I was at Deep Green Bank, which was that internet only bank that we had built, when we first built that, and it's crazy like what innovates and what is sort of like, and I think it always happens like this, what you sort of retain from the old, more traditional world. So a quick thumbnail, what we were doing there is we were essentially creating a website where a homeowner with equity in their home could come onto that website, could fill out a short web form, which at that time was a little bit crazy. We actually had instructions on how to fill out a web form, if you can believe that.
I do.
Uh,
I've seen
we
them.
yeah, I mean it was a whole different experience. They answered about 20 questions, and then we would actually underwrite in real time. We'd go out and we'd get their credit report. Again, all this seems like silly simple now, but we had to build all these systems. We'd go out there, get their credit report. We would review that. It would go out and get an automated valuation model or an AVM. It would look at the kind of the value of that home, and then ultimately give them an offer which they could accept, where we could lend them money. So that was the innovation. But the second problem, once we kind of build this awesome system that nobody had ever done anything like this, online lending in real time, was we had to advertise it. And believe it or not, our first entree into advertising this was a company called Bankrate. And a lot of people have heard of Bankrate. But what Bankrate was famous for at that time was they had the rate table, if you will, in all of the business sections of the paper newspapers. And so we would advertise with Bankrate, which would get us in the rate tables in the traditional newspaper in the business section. So again, kind of taking this old world to move them and drive them to the internet to do this new process. And then there was this little company called Lending Tree that was coming on the scene that was
Oh
doing
my
this thing.
gosh, really?
Yes, I mean they were brand new, and not to tell too many stories, but it's kind of fun at the time. So we said, "Hey, we hear that you're generating leads on the internet. We actually lend on the internet. We should connect, and we want to buy leads from you and get all those things coming through our system." And so the next conversation, as we're talking to them, is like, "Sure, that's easy. We'll set you up, and we'll start faxing you leads on Monday." And we're like,
Oh,
"Whoa,
did you just say faxing?
faxing?" So what they were doing at the time was they were actually generating the lead through a web form on the internet, and then they were turning it into a PDF, and then they were sending it via fax to loan officers, which loan officers didn't have CRMs or lead management systems or get leads digitally. They needed them to come through the fax machine, and they would print them out. And they would hand them out to the loan officers physically. So we said, no, we're going to use this little, and again, this is a little bit nerdy, but there's this thing called XML that's coming out there. Why don't we just see if we can just take your data and we can transform it and put it right into our lead engine, and then we'll respond to you with an offer. And that's ultimately we did, and we sort of grew out of that. in the midst of all of this, while we're doing this, and that was hugely successful. Most of our internet lending came through LendingTree soon after that. But during this time, one of the developers came into my office and said, "Hey, take a look at this thing." Now, at the time, the internet was basically Yahoo directories. Like everything was a directory, and you would go through and you'd look for what you wanted. And they just spent all their time with people probably organizing links on a page. And he showed me this website that had a box in the middle and not much more. And he said, "You can just put what you're looking for in here, and then when you hit enter, it builds a directory for you, like dynamically." And so that was
Are we
Google.
talking Google? I was
We
going to
were
say it
talking
has to
Google,
be
like, but
Google.
again, at the time, like everything was in the context of a directory. So, and they didn't have an ad platform at the time. So it was a few years actually after we sold the bank, where Google was kind of in a position where Google ads really dominated. But again, we were figuring things out, in a while we were straddling, um, that old world and that new world. And I think Google was that major sort of transformative moment. And just to bring this full circle to AI, I think kind of we haven't had something quite like that in the digital marketing space since Google. And I think now AI, ChatGPT, these large language models, and what Google did is it changed people's behaviors. It changed the patterns. And so marketing and sales had to adapt to that. I think we're in that moment again with these large language models and ChatGPT and people going there, particularly with, more complex decisions that they're making. And we're having to figure out, okay, what does sales and marketing do with that when everybody's changed their behavior, changed their pattern, and they're over here, and I've still got systems running on Google ads and Facebook ads, which I think there's several years ahead of them. But we are at that moment where I think soon we won't be looking in the newspaper at rate tables anymore. We'll have an expectation that we can get that information through the large language models.
I would think so. So my next question is, what core principles haven't changed even with all the tech and AI? What is still the same?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think at the end of the day, marketing and sales, again, getting back to patterns, I don't think really anything has changed in the core of the pattern. So we have people that have something that they're interested in. They have demand for something, they have wants, they have needs. And then we, as sellers of products and services, need to put an offer in front of them that is compelling, that sort of guides them to us so that we can have that conversation or we can show them that information to complete the transaction. So the pattern is the same. We have demand and we have supply. And then in the middle, we have to use the mediums that are available to us to effectively get the right offer in front of the right people. And then, in a really good way, sort of guide them into that final decision or transaction. So in the middle of that, we've moved from newspaper ads to Yahoo directories to Google search and Facebook ads, and now we're moving on to large language models. So the medium is moving on us and how we get in front of or distribute those offers. But that core flow really hasn't changed much, and I don't think it really will. That's just the way us humans sort of are wired and do things.
And I agree with you. I mean, we're going to buy what we find attractive or what we really need. Look at Amazon. I
Yeah.
mean, Amazon was just a bookseller for the longest kind of time. And now you can't go anywhere without going, oh, I need that. I get my cat food from Amazon,
Right.
not
Totally.
Walmart, not the grocery store. It's delivered to my front door. So we're going to buy what we want to buy. It's just that B2B and B2C need to make it easier for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the same thing. And like you said, B2B, we've talked a lot of B2C, but B2B is sort of a similar thing. And it has inherently different channels. I mean, we do a little bit of inbound marketing. I'm a big fan of using Google search and now large language models to bring in some of that inbound demand. And it's certainly easier. But enterprise or B2B is a little bit different in that generally, although sometimes we have spouses or partners that are part of the decision. More so on the B2B, there's often multiple people and even levels to that decision. And so even in that, we're doing the same thing. There's a want, there's a need, there's a demand, and we have to get a compelling offer in front of them. But that's a little bit of a different equation because we're usually trying to sort of get it in front of a handful of people or generate something that's compelling to a variety of perspectives, right? It's compelling to the chief marketing officer, but at the same time feels easy to implement and doesn't make the CTO's job harder, right? So B2B, again, same thing, slightly different mediums. We use a lot more email, we use a lot more content, but again, large language models is starting to pull a lot of that stuff together because when B2B or groups go in there, they're asking more complex problems. And again, they can kind of arrive at a decision faster, I think, through some of these large language models. So it's interesting. But even in the B2B space, I don't agree with people that say it's kind of all the same. You're always selling to
Oh, no,
people.
it's not. No, no, no,
Yeah, totally
not even
different.
close. And to give you an example, this podcast, like I mentioned, is 17 and a half years old. I get inquiries every single day, including Sunday. And I used to have to do a fair bit of research. Is this a good guest? Is this going to be, how is this going to work out? And now I'll be honest with you, I go straight to Perplexity and I
Yeah.
do a search on my guest there. And I'll say, well, the last question I'll ask is, will this person be a good guest for your Partner in Success Radio?
Mm.
Then I take it and I start doing deeper research and I form my questions. I talk with you. I love it. And it doesn't take me but 15 or 20 minutes as opposed to a couple of hours per guest. It's very, very helpful, but I like Perplexity for that.
Yeah, that's yeah, I love all of these. Of course, we're spending time in all of them, but Perplexity is yeah, definitely a leader, especially as you're doing research and those sorts of things. Yeah, love that platform.
Yeah, I do too. It's my favorite actually, and right now I'm mad at chat. We're not speaking. So it just I had a fight with it last week. I may have to forgive it, but not today. So
Yes.
how is AI truly changing the game right now for lead generation? I mean, we talked about that a bit, but I guess my real mistake is not my mistake. My real question is, what are some common mistakes that you see when businesses try to bolt AI onto their sales or marketing? And especially, and I see this all the time, well, my receptionist is going to do it, or my dental nurse is going to. No, no, you need experts to do this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's well, like any new sort of technology, and this is on the verge of not evolution but revolution, as far as kind of how it's changing things, and this, unlike a lot of changes, is really touching a lot of different layers, a lot of different people, a lot of different parts of our process. So I think the first and biggest mistake and I think again this is common when we get something sort of neat like this is we have a tendency to start, and maybe it's because I have kids and they've been in school. We try to get it to do our homework, and when
Yeah,
I say that,
I
it
do it
is
too. I have to
yeah.
be a kid. It's like, I don't want to do this. Fix it for me.
Right, right, totally. And I think when I say that, just to be a little more descriptive, is so we have something that we need to do, and we just hand it to it and say, "Hey, write, I need to write a blog post or I need to write a newsletter today. Write this for me." And that's all we give it. And so uh, just think about if you'd given that to an employee or a more junior team member or something like that, you'd probably get what we call AI slop. You'd get a similar kind of junk back because you didn't give it context, you didn't give it an understanding of what outcome you were hoping to achieve when you wrote and sent that newsletter and those sorts of things. So I think that's the first thing is don't just sort of and I think this is where a lot of people have bad experiences and they sort of well, that didn't work, it kind of gave me junk, and they abandon it and they get a little bit behind. So I think the first thing that I encourage people to do is just insert it into your workflow as a colleague, as someone to bounce that part of your process off of, someone to ask a few more questions of, or open your kind of field of view a little bit. So all the way back at the beginning, we sort of talked about patterns and how I kind of put things in boxes. And I know we have success. One of the things I've found that's been really helpful is the reason that I do or did that is because it makes me very efficient. It gives me predictable results. But with AI, now I can be a little bit more creative and still get predictable results out of that, but allow it to, like a colleague, say, hey, this is what I see. This is what I'm thinking. I think I'm going to go down this approach. It's worked for me before. Um, Giving that to AI because it does have kind of consumed all information that's sort of readily available in the public domain, often it will widen my perspective a little bit and give me like, yeah, you're right. I haven't tried that in a while. Maybe I should, do something like that, or maybe I should add something to the process. Or quite honestly, one of the things that I'm enjoying lately is some of the steps in the process that I would like to do. Let's again take the simplest of things like a blog post. Well, we're trying to do blog posts and get them out there and everything. Sometimes we run out of time. We don't do as much research as we want to do. Maybe we skip the step of outlining. Maybe we skip the step of creating a writer's guide to really kind of think through our thoughts. Now with I can ask it to do some of those steps in the process and give me sort of a richer process to go and do the final article with, either more research, more thought through, better organization. So I think the kind of the first step is using the AI to sort of augment yourself, give you a colleague to bounce things off of, getting it to challenge you. A lot of people don't do this. A lot of times they give it a task, but I think it gives some, because AI is sort of a people pleaser, and so it will. This is where hallucinations come in and stuff like that. Is
Yeah.
it's trying
Yeah,
to
those
help
are kind of
you.
fun though.
Yeah, exactly.
If you know
But
what
if you
they're what it is. If you don't, you're in trouble.
Totally. But if you ask it to challenge you, it can also be a pretty intense critic. But you do have to ask it to do that. So I think that's another sort of trick that people should be adding to their kind of list of things to try. Give
I
it something and
agree.
challenge it.
Right. And I also, when I'm speaking to any of these models, do this in my own voice because they know me by now.
Right.
And they're very good at coming up with words that I would write that. Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds like I wrote, I'm good with that. But I will take, just because I don't trust anything really, I'm just suspicious by nature. I will start with Perplexity. I may take it over to chat. I may move it over to, right now, I'm not real happy with Grok either, but I may move it around a little bit and get different attitudes.
Yeah.
And then I'll
Totally.
say, okay, now, Denise, you can sit down, put this in a document and write it yourself.
Oh yeah, for sure. And that's a great technique to, even within the same model, but multiple models, once you break it out of the context and ask it to take an objective view, we're doing
Hmm.
one of those similar things. So one of the challenges in our environment when we're creating content is oftentimes compliance, legal and compliance reviews are sort of the longest part of the process. And so now what we're doing is we're actually building sort of a separate discrete agent that does nothing but legal and compliance review. And we're creating a certification. So we're essentially creating the content. we're using AI to do that. And then we take a separate agent, sometimes with a different model, even with the same model, it works pretty effectively, give it a different perspective, a different role, and ask it to objectively evaluate the content for quality and for compliance. It does a really good job of evaluating that. And then we can deliver a certification with information, scorecard, and that sort of thing to the compliance department that can kind of guide them and give them more confidence in our process as we kind of move through there. So taking it out of context and having other models or another agent with a separate role objectively review some of this stuff is going to give you a higher quality product.
It does. And believe it or not, and I only know this because a very dear friend of mine was having a lot of trouble with a family reunion that she was at over the weekend, and it went badly for so many people. And she went to Chat and asked Chat to guide her, to act as not necessarily a psychologist, but a
Yeah.
counselor. And it was amazing what Chat came up to. And I told her, I said, listen, you don't want to ask me about this because I'll tell you to tell them to go to hell. You just don't,
Right.
that would be my response. You don't want to listen to me. But she got very, very deep with it, and it was astonishing. I wouldn't have thought to even do that.
Yeah, I watched a recent interview with Sam Altman, and he
Oh
was
yeah,
talking,
yeah.
and he mentioned that, somebody was asking some questions about that, and he said, yeah, we obviously try to encourage them to seek professional counsel and stuff like that. He goes, but a lot of the people that are using ChatGPT are coming back to us and saying, don't take that out of the model, because there are a lot of people where it is creating some support. So that's kind of interesting that you bring that up. That's obviously something they're trying to figure out, like where is the right balance there with being support for folks, but also making sure that it doesn't kind of overstep its abilities.
Exactly. And she was, copying some of this to me, and I was stunned.
Yeah,
I really, it would not have occurred to me. Like I said, my first thought would be leave, tell them to
yeah,
drop
yeah,
dead. I don't
yeah,
play well, I really don't play well with others, but she got much better information from ChatGPT than she would have gotten from
yeah,
me. So it's something to certainly look at. Don't take it. You're right. Don't take it as, you might need professional help, but it makes you stop and think, and that's what it did with her.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
So let's go back to you sold your seven-figure agency. What do you wish that you'd known earlier that other founders should absolutely prepare for? Because you learned a lot, I think, during that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned there. One, in whatever business that you're building, and we kind of hit a dip that forced us to do some of this, but learning how to sort of package your business and run your business in a very organized, professional way. A lot of times when we bootstrap, we're scrappy. By nature, I think even some VC funded businesses are like this. You get scrappy by nature, and so you don't document things well. You don't sort of have processes for a lot of things, and so in our particular case, we kind of hit a real dip that put us into you know kind of a real slump, and revenue was down and everything, and so I had to kind of sit down and say, okay, we got to sort of turn things around. And what had happened is we sort of gotten complacent and got a little bit sloppy in good times, and when bad times kind of hit, we had to tighten up the ship. And then as we sort of tightened things up, we started to do a better job at documenting things, and did a better job at sort of creating those processes so that they're repeatable, and also, quite honestly, so that we could have different people come in and out of the organization. Another thing, small bootstrapped, we just assume that we're always going to have the people we start with, and that's some of the things that hurt us. Is we had some people transition in and out of the organization, because as a small group, small agency, sometimes we don't have all of the levels for somebody to progress, and so they'll move out, but they're highly capable and they create holes in your business. So I guess to just kind of nail that down to the simplicity of it is, again, learning to organize things in a good way, to set up processes, to make sure that your business functions from legal to accounting are well organized. All of that goes well into essentially marketing your business, the data room, as we often talk. If you've got a good, nice, well organized data room, it pulls in a lot of interest because they can see the whole business. They can see how it operates. They can see that it's consistent. They can see that it, again, if they want to make some adjustments, they know that it's not all the founder and it's not all the heroics of individual personalities. They can see that there's truly a business there that is a system, a mechanism by which they can take whatever, and this is often the case when there's an acquirer, they want to bring their mechanisms, their leverage, their advantage into the business. That could be more money, that could be bolting it on to another system and you add some capability. It could be other markets that you could expand into. So there's a lot of different sort of objectives there, but I think the core of it is as early as possible, really getting that thing organized into a well-honed system that's easy for investors and or acquisition partners to kind of get their arms around very quickly and see the value prop.
So you just said a term that I have never heard of, data room. What is that?
Yeah, often when you're selling a business, usually you're entertaining more than one offer or one investor that's interested in looking at it, and so that's literally, and now it's become sort of an online thing. Back when we sold Deep Green Bay, these entities, they would come into the organization, they would sit down with some three-ring binders where we kind of organized everything and some briefings and stuff like that, and they would take a look at things, and then of course they'd talk to some people and everything. But now in the digital age, that's literally kind of an online space where they can, look at your P&L, they can look at your financial statements, they can look at your contracts, they can look at the processes that you've set up to run the business. So it's literally a sort of an online repository of some documents that they can quickly go through as that first look at your business before they dig deeper. And the more they can understand from that review and the more efficient you can make that, usually the more and better offers you get because they can then sort of quickly do that review, know that you're in the box, again, back to patterns, know that you're in the box that they're looking for. And then from there, they can kind of do the deep dive and the due diligence to make sure everything's supported and then it's a deal they want to do.
Now, I have to ask for solo founders or very lean teams without a dedicated sales department, how how do you find somebody to do all of this work for you? Because it
Yeah,
sounds like it's critical.
yeah, it is. Quite honestly, if you build the business that way, now there's um, we didn't have this before, but like you could either well organize it in your Google Drive. Again, a lot of this is
Ah,
organization. You could create a data room in Notion would probably be the most logical place to do it, where you could buy you're just operating out of Notion, so that can again give some visibility. However, as you go into this process, and this is another decision you'll have to make, are you marketing the business, or are you just entertaining? You'll get a lot of inquiries as your business gets to a certain size, and that's kind of what sparked us. Is we were getting a lot of inquiries, and I was like, maybe I'll take a look at, a little bit of liquidity or taking some money off the table, so to speak. But there are also brokers. They're folks that specialize in this. And so um, if you're not sales and marketing, that can be a good route to go. Just keep in mind they usually take a large chunk of that sale, but they can be super helpful. They've already got the contacts. They know how to market the business. They can help you to organize and build that initial sort of data room and the material that an investor is going to have to look at. So obviously, as with anything, they introduce a lot of value, but they're going to take their pound of flesh, so to speak. So, but if you're operating your business in an organized way, you have good growth, you're probably actually going to attract quite a bit of interest. So you may not have to go through sort of as organized an acquisition process, depending on, again, your level of success.
Understood. Marketing, we've mentioned it several times, and I'm trying to think what this old phrase was that sticks. I guess the idea sticks in my head, but I can't remember what the phrase was. Basically, if you're marketing today and you haven't been marketing before, you're behind. It's almost too late, or something like that.
Yeah.
So shouldn't you be very consistent with your marketing, whatever it is?
Yeah, I think so. And we talked earlier about like channels and ways to get your message out. I don't think there's ever been an easier time. A lot of us talk about founder-led marketing. That has been, very effective. I mean, LinkedIn loves for individuals to talk into the channel. If you have a company page on LinkedIn, like no one ever sees a company page on LinkedIn. So I think there's a lot of channels through social media that allow you to get your voice out as a founder and kind of do some of that initial traction building. And then again, YouTube, podcast. There's just so many channels that allow you to get your personal voice out there as a founder, and I would always start there. And then from there, it just evolves and broadens. You bring in talented people, you add their voice to the mix. In my mind, that's kind of the best way to start from the very beginning, telling your story as a founder, and then from there, just adding layers and perhaps more complexity at different scales, so you can reach larger and larger audiences. But to your point, you should be marketing from the day you start, even if it's just sending a couple emails out to your friends and family saying, "Hey, I'm doing this thing."
It, and we don't know where to start. So many of us. Listen, when I started my podcast, I was one of maybe 8 people, and I'm not sure that's an exaggeration. We were scarce on the ground, and
Mm.
there was nobody to teach me to do anything, but I'm not teachable, to be honest. I fight with my nav system. She is not the boss of me. So I had to learn to do it all on my own, and it's been fascinating. But I'm going to go back to, and you mentioned it earlier in a roundabout kind of way, storytelling.
Mhm.
That's why we buy things. We buy the story. We buy the history. We want to be told stories, stories that resonate with us.
Yeah.
And I don't
Yeah,
think
for
I'm
sure.
too far wrong there.
No, for sure. I mean, I think just even, as humans, like, I think it's easier for us to mentally process a story that resonates and say, okay, yeah, that's like me. Again, maybe it goes back to the pattern thing a
Right.
little bit. It's like that feels like me. I can, understand their particular experience or their particular journey, or I've had some shared experiences and those sorts of things. And it really tightens that audience up. I mean, one thing, not to, I keep going back to the military, but I think there's a lot of good strategies inside of there. But one of the things that I think worked so well in the military is, when we came on station, so when we got assigned to a new unit or a new location, which happened every couple of years, I think one of the things that pulled us together so tightly is we all had a shared experience. We all had similar training. We all had similar experiences together. We all had sort of a common core mission. And so that pulled us together tightly. I think stories do a similar thing when we're doing marketing. When you tell a story, you start to pull and it sort of tightens up the connections of those people that have a shared experience. And so the story essentially just shares what your experience is so that those people who are like you can sort of pull in tighter. And then once they do, of course, that builds trust. And from there, you can put your offer in and show them and guide them how to get something that you found, valuable. And so I think that's kind of how all that works together. And story becomes kind of the first mechanism to help to get people sort of pulling in the right direction.
Absolutely. And that leads me to this is kind of a, I'm not even sure it's what we're still talking about, but it popped into my head. How do you build content driven lead generation systems that actually scale while you're telling your story and without burning yourself out or your team out or draining your budget. That's a big concern. Especially years ago when, everybody was becoming a virtual assistant. And, now it's social media marketing. The first question asked is, I can guarantee, is how much?
Yeah.
That's not what you should be asking.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, I'm a big believer in sort of content driven marketing because it does allow you a lot of different formats to tell your story. Scale becomes a problem, and it always has been. But I think this again is where AI starts to help. So one of the limitations, back in the day, was how many words per minute can you type, right? You've got all
Right.
these ideas and you're trying to get them out and you're trying to type up an outline or maybe trying to type up a script for a video or those sorts of things. Now you can build up a project inside of your favorite, ChatGPT or Claude or even Perplexity, I think can do that. You sort of build up a project, you feed it some information about you, you start talking to it so that it starts to learn and understand you. And then it can kind of take away some of the limitations. So now you can ask it to help you ideate on, the next 20 blog posts that you're going to write,
I
to
do
help
that,
you.
by the
Yeah,
way.
yeah,
I mean, in the first of the month, I've got the rest of the month worked out. All I have to do then is figure out where it's going to go, what time it's going to go, and, you know, flesh it out. But I've
yeah.
got the ideas. I don't have to go, oh, geez, what are we talking about today?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's what gives you scale, right? You can have AI, be put into some of the workflows. You mentioned virtual assistants. I use those as a force multiplier, right? They can help to deploy and distribute and get it into the right channel and do it in the right way. And I can train those folks to kind of do it, in my approach. And so I think you're looking for those force multipliers to really start to scale things up. And then the nice thing about that, particularly as you're growing an organization or you have a team, is once you take and allow, your AI and your agents to kind of do some of that execution, you can pull up, you can spend more time with strategy. And then I think one of the best things that I've seen running agencies and working with people, a lot of times they all became sort of autonomous and they had to learn on their own and figure things out. And you kind of give them a little bit of coaching here and there. But now with AI, I like to, a lot of times people turn productivity into just more work. One thing that I've been really advocating is like, once you get those productivity gains and you get that margin, take that margin and spend more time with the people, the humans in your life, whether that's sales, whether that's your internal team. Take more time to spend with humans and let AI kind of do that execution. I think that's probably what we should be doing with that extra productivity that we're being able to gain.
I agree with you. And I'm so glad that you said, you're able to train your VAs. So many people don't do it.
Mm,
This is why virtual assistants industry some time ago got such a bad rap
yeah,
because people would say, well, I hired a VA and they didn't do what I wanted them to do. Well, did you train them? Well, no, they're supposed to know what, no, 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 no.
yeah,
And that still happens today.
yeah, yeah. And there's really no excuse for that. I mean, I love
No.
like standard SOPs. I mean, standard
Yep.
operating procedures. We do that. And again, all this stuff ties together. Like if you're going to try to sell your business, if you have a bunch of organized SOPs on how you get things done, not only does it allow you to um, put people into roles and quickly get them up to speed and trained. And then you add on to that like Loom videos as a part of that SOP, build all that out in Notion. Again, it helps you to scale, it helps you to put people in. As people transition in and out of the organization, you can get them in and up to speed quickly. And then ultimately, if you want to sell that business, turning that loose in the data room for investors to look at, they're like, wow, we can, we can snap a lot of different things on here, put a lot of different people in different places, or move people around, and the system's still going to function because we have these sort of core elements and standard operating procedures that again gives us predictable outcomes.
Right. And you know what I found out when and I knew from the very beginning that I needed to have SOPs, but I didn't have time. It's always the big excuse. I don't have time. I'm doing it all myself anyway. When I started putting them in place, I realized how much stuff I should not be doing.
Right.
That was kind of eye-opening.
Yeah.
There's some things that you just don't do. I mean, if you're charging $500 an hour and you're doing $10 an hour work, stop it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think you identify things that you should be doing. I think you identify things that you shouldn't be doing. You identify things that, and again, this is where I love introducing AI. At some point, there gets to a place where you're doing so much that you're starting to sort of drop things off where you think you can kind of cheat a little bit or you can kind of get by. But now with AI and introducing some more productivity, you can insert some of those quality steps back in. So I think again, but yeah, as you sit down and you do the hard work of thinking through the standard operating procedure and how you should be doing things and how you want to be doing things, usually that opens a lot of insight into little gaps and holes that are probably snuck into your process.
Absolutely. Bill, this has been a fascinating conversation, and I thank you for sharing so many valuable insights with us today. But before I let you go, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to leave with our audience? And where's the best place for our listeners to connect with you?
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing is just be curious. That's always served me well. Be curious, play with the new things, and figure out, again, how to put it alongside of some of your workflows instead of just, looking for silver bullets all the time. As far as how to find me, it's pretty simple. BillRiceStrategy.com is the best way to sort of connect with me, learn more about what I do. And then one of the things, again, because I'm a curious individual, I love these periods of transition and figuring out kind of what's new and what I should be paying attention to. Some time ago, I created a newsletter. myexecutivebrief.com, and it originally was intended to kind of be a little bit like a chief of staff, sort of bringing in all that information to you in an organized way so you can kind of look at it every day, or in our case once a week, and that's what we've done. I'm looking out there with my team, looking for the new things, kind of putting my perspective on it, having kind of looked at new things for 30 plus years, and trying to navigate transitions. That gives hopefully a little insight back to you to kind of spot and know what you should be paying attention to as an executive.
You don't ever get bored, do you?
I don't. I'm hugely. Actually, it's funny you say that because I always say that. Like people say, "Oh, I'm bored," or like I don't have anything to do. I was like, I don't really know what that feels like because I'm just so curious.
Yeah, I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Where did that come from? Walk
Uh,
outside and take a deep breath. New ideas are coming. They're coming. Just, pay attention.
Absolutely.
Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation with you. And listen, you are welcome to come back to the show anytime you've got something else you'd like to share. Just let me know.
I'd be happy to. I appreciate the opportunity. It's wonderful talking to your audience.
Thank you. Well, listen, everybody, from the power of AI and lead generation to preparing a business for acquisition, he's given us a lot to think about. So I hope you're walking away with practical ideas that you can put to work in your own business. Be sure to connect with Bill Rice to learn more about how he helps founders, excuse me, my voice is shot, helps founders build smarter, scalable growth systems. And thank you for joining us on your Partner in Success Radio. Until next time, stay curious. I love that word. It's one of my favorite words. Stay curious, keep taking bold action, and I will see you in the next episode. Bill, again, thank you so much.
Get your voice heard. If you would like to launch your own far-reaching podcast, contact Denise Griffitts at yourofficeontheweb.com and go to the podcast tab.